What is up, everybody? I feel like I need to get a feel for the crowd. I don't know if people are excited because they've gotten exactly what they wanted, or if there are people out there who are pretending to be excited because they didn't quite get what they wanted, but they can't show that they're bothered by anything. Or if, more realistically, a couple million people that have just bought their first Nintendo console because Nintendo fans were not buying the Switch 2 are starting to get a proper feel of what it means to own a Nintendo console. It has been nearly 2 months since the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, and pretty much every single week since the console was launched, a direct has been rumored. And that's largely because the console launched around the time of what used to be E3, but also because people just get hyped, seemingly. I don't think it's a Nintendo thing per se, but it definitely happens a lot with Nintendo fans. You see, about 20 years ago, Nintendo figured out that the best way to keep people hyped and engaged and overly obsessive about your product was by remaining entirely silent and drip-feeding the tiniest bit of news in order to keep people interested in something that's otherwise not interesting. Started off with the Smash Brothers Smash Dojo days on the website, where they'd give you a single piece of news every single day, and all of a sudden you find just millions of people online having a discussion about an item in the game. What happens though is that if you give all of this news at once in a single video, that item goes ignored. Nobody talks about it. But when you drip feed, it allows every single piece of news some time to marinate, to get attention. And likewise, it continues to build the hype of people that have little self-control and just a need to feel like they belong in this bigger discussion, this grander community. It's the same thing here. Nintendo has stretched out their directs throughout the years, but if I'm not mistaken, the last direct we got was, back in March, when it was Switch 1 stuff? And obviously that's because Nintendo developed their app. And now they're using their app for exclusivity, hitting people with copyright strikes and takedown notices if they were to rip the videos off of their Today app and post it online. This actually happened. Basically, they just kind of want to drip out one bit of news at a time, as slow as possible, because let's be real, we got a Dragon Drive trailer yesterday, and the only reason anybody even talked about Dragon Drive was because it was in that trailer. Mario Paint dropped a couple nights ago, and it would have gotten some attention, but it got more because it was just given its own time in the sun. Now, once upon a time, hype for Nintendo games, hype for Nintendo announcements was natural. It just went based off of their clock. Whenever they get things done, we find out about it, we get excited about it, and the hype is just there and everybody buys it. But now they like to prey on everybody's eagerness, causing many people to go out there and buy the Switch 2 on launch with a full expectation amongst the fandom that surely there must be a direct coming soon. And look, since everybody's throwing their hat in the game, I'm calling it from now. First party Nintendo Direct, August 2025. You heard it here first. I got people on the inside who told me this. My name is Nintendine, so the Nintendo comes from Nintendo. I got connections. So rest assured, those of you that were looking for a proper Nintendo Direct, I have spoken. It is coming. Now, of course, I know what most of you are gonna say. We don't need more games. Nintendo's already packed our calendar. We got Donkey Kong Bonanza and Mario Kart right off the bat, and everybody that says that's not enough is wrong. But that's for the 30 or 40 of you that were actually Nintendo fans ahead of time. You knew how this worked. The rest of you Sony fanboys that recently jumped ship, or PC gamers that shrugged and figured, might as well get a Switch too. Genuinely, don't go into this partner direct expecting some massive announcement. I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility. Like, anything is possible. But I'm seeing people predicting Halo Master Chief Collection on the Switch 2. I'm seeing people predicting the announcement of Dreamcast for the Nintendo Switch Online. I'm seeing people predicting that there are gonna be some really big boy announcements on this thing. But y'all are forgetting that this is a Nintendo console. It's not a big boy console. You're probably gonna get a bunch of JRPGs, and if you're lucky, they'll be good ones. Oftentimes, however, they're just mid. I actually had a big feeling this was going to be a partner direct a few days ago when they announced that it was going to be focused on third parties. They being Nate the Hate, who seems to be 2 for 2 in 2025. I was doubting him not for this direct, but I was doubting him back in January because he's been wrong in the past, but it seems he's kind of learned his lesson and just stays quiet until he's guaranteed something is correct. And I actually completely respect that. But it wasn't just the Nate the Hate talk that got me convinced it was going to be a partner direct. It was the fact that EA and 2K both announced that they would have presentations around 10:30 a.m. So I figured they planned that around doing it right after the partner direct, since those are usually early in the morning. Whatever the case is, this doesn't matter too much because at the end of the day, they're third-party games. The best-selling third-party title on the Nintendo Switch only had 8 million copies sold, which is good, don't get me wrong, but that was the 24th best-selling game on the Nintendo Switch 1, as opposed to something like the PlayStation 4, where 4 out of the top 10 titles were not made by Sony, and 7 titles sold more than that 8 million number that the Nintendo Switch 1 had. And mind you, this is on the PlayStation 4, a console that did not do as well as the Nintendo Switch. But still, the third parties flourish much more on those consoles because at the end of the day, Nintendo is for first parties. You're not going into it for third parties. Now, that's not to say that people don't buy third party titles on Nintendo consoles, but it's much more rare. There's been this argument that Nintendo's consoles do the best when they get third party support, and I think that's kind of a cause and effect discussion. So definitely in the 90s, it was a real thing. Nintendo failed because they didn't get the third-party support because Nintendo decided to go to the cartridge when Sony decided to do the DVD, which made it easier. Or I guess at the time it was a CD, not a DVD. And then likewise, the GameCube failed, but part of the reason the GameCube failed is because they decided to deliver a purple lunchbox at a time where a large chunk of the gaming community was out of the baby phase. Plus, once again, they decided to get weird and release those mini DVDs instead of just being normal. But once you hit the Wii, it changes. The Wii did well because of the motion controls, and as a result, they got the third-party support. The Wii U had third-party support at the start, but it still failed. The Nintendo Switch was doing great, and as such, they got more third-party games pumped onto there. But you know, they're getting last-gen ports on there, which seems to be the same pattern that's going to be going into the Switch too. And just like with the Wii U, a lot of the big names are going to show up to the dance. They're going to be like, okay, if this thing's going to be as successful as the Switch, we want to be on it. But as soon as they start to realize that their sales aren't doing well because the third-party games are not doing as well on the Switch 2 as the third-party publishers expected, they're going to once again jump ship so fast. Because even the advantage that the Switch had in the previous generation, you know, the fact that it was like the only portable device that can play certain games, the Switch 2 doesn't have that advantage. It's even competing against the Switch 1, let alone all the handheld gaming PCs. Actually, I would say that the Switch 1 is its biggest competition when it comes to third-party games because the third-party games that Nintendo consoles get are generally much weaker. Tomorrow's Direct is going to be filled with 3 key things. Speaking of key, number 1 will be the fact that they're going to be mostly game key cards, which is going to be just a disaster for a lot of people. Number 2, if they are higher-end, stronger games, most people that are going to be interested in those higher-end games are not going to be interested in buying it for the Switch 2. They're going to get it for another console, or even their PC. And that's assuming they don't own them and the games that are being shown are actually brand new, because a lot of them are going to be $70 ports of games that came out 3 or 4 years ago. And then the weaker third-party titles, the ones that flood the eShop already, they're going to run just as well on the Switch 1, so people are going to buy it for the Switch 1 instead. And the sales numbers will reflect that. Don't let anybody fool you into thinking that all of a sudden the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be the people's high-end gaming console of choice. It is and will always be the Mario machine. And that's fine. That's why we love Nintendo games. I just don't know why so many people are fighting against that fact, though. Speaking of Mario, if you guys were excited for the 40th anniversary and looking for a good Direct, the free Fan Game Festival, or F3 presentation, dropped a few days ago on the 26th. And as per usual, the fans, the people that are actually passionate about this stuff, are doing what Nintendo don't. Actually, I'm probably going to have that footage playing in the background, so you've probably been seeing it for the past 8 or so minutes. That Direct will realistically have more of what you want to see than tomorrow's third-party Game Keycard Direct will have. But for all of you brand new Nintendo fans that are wondering what the heck is going on, I thought we were going to find out all these release dates for these amazing games. Yeah, welcome aboard. This is usually how it goes. Nintendo is like 1 step forward, 3 steps back every step of the way. And actually, that's a perfect transition into the new Mario Kart update. So first off, seemingly Mario Kart World was dead. I thought it was funny that there were a lot of people going around and just regurgitating the same talk over and over again that Mario Kart is dead, Mario Kart is dead. I'm like, okay, I get it. You guys are just chasing the hype. One person talked about it, so now everybody's got to talk about it. What was kind of funny to me is that some people told me that there were certain creators and influencers and Twitter folks, I don't know what the technical term is for these Nintendo shill channels, but apparently they were making videos in response to the Switch to Mario Kart World being dead, even though it was like the entirety of the internet had agreed at the same time that this game was dead, and people were showing that their lobbies were just taking too long to load and they would have way more NPCs than they had the previous month. And genuinely on my side, I was like, this is being blown out of proportion. The game's been out for over a month. It's obviously not going to be as packed as it was in the first month, especially when it was the only game available for the better part of a month. Or I guess really the only new game that people actually wanted to play up until DK Bonanza came out. So I didn't think that it was a big deal that it was quote unquote dead. And I didn't think it was dead either. I just figured it just kind of slowed down a bit. But no, despite the fact that these people came to the defense of the game and they said that actually it's not dead, it's well and healthy and this is completely fine, it seems like it was actually dead because Nintendo just updated the hell out of the game. I won't go through all the patch notes because I don't really care, but the most important thing was that they supposedly reversed the update that they made last time. And a lot of you guys already know about this. The update basically took it so that before people used to click on random and that would guarantee they would get a 3-lap race. You know, because the game has 3-lap races and then it has the intermission tracks, which are just long stretches of road, which are not that fun. Well, the update ruined that. If you clicked random, that made it so that you no longer guaranteed a 3-lap race. So those not fun courses became part of the mixture because Nintendo's like, screw you, you like what I tell you to like, not what you want to like. So they didn't completely reverse the situation. All they did was that make it so that 3-lap races would show up more as options prior to a race beginning. And based off of the reaction from people online, this fix is not really a fix at all. Like some people are joking, they're like, well, yeah, if it was a 5% chance before, maybe now it's a 6% chance. So basically, to walk it through, everybody was loving the game. Nintendo ruined the game. Nintendo fixed what they did that ruined the game, but they didn't fix it right, so now the game is still ruined, despite the fact that everybody got excited because they thought the game was going to be alive again. I think that explains it pretty well. But once again, for all of the brand new Nintendo fans that just got their first Nintendo console and are just like, this is ridiculous. Yeah, it is ridiculous. And it's also exactly the way that Nintendo operates. As a matter of fact, despite what some people might have you believe, Nintendo actually does pay a lot of attention to the online discourse. They completely ignore it and they don't engage with it because that would be terrible for them. But they are a massive corporation. Obviously, they know what people are saying and they're keeping an eye on it and considering things close to their chest. And then most importantly, when they do act on it, they obviously don't come out and say, hey, we made a mistake and this is what you're gonna get. They fix it in different ways just to let you know, like, hey, we heard you and we get it. So in the case of this update, for example, they did that Accolades trailer to make people think about Mario Kart again, and they released the update shortly after. So now everybody's thinking about Mario Kart, thinking about the update, and they're like, oh, it's good to go again. But very important, the reason Nintendo updated it is actually not because of the discourse, not explicitly. It's because the numbers were actually showing a drastic drop-off in the amount of people that were playing this game. And part of the reason that people stop playing the game is because the 3-lap races are what they want to play, but also because the discussion online became massive, so people protested. The game actually was dead, or at the very least dying, and this is very clear proof of that. This is a prime example of why it's good to push back against these companies because they'll give you what you want as long as the numbers reflect it. Now, they've done a terrible job at giving people what they want, but if this continues and more people are still not playing the game and it's still dead or at least dying, you're gonna get your 3-lap races mode. The same way that Nintendo has yet to put out an $80 game because they've seen that people are not willing to spend $80 on a title, whether that's a Switch 2 exclusive game or a Switch 2 edition game. The sales numbers seem to be pretty low. And the same way that they felt the need to throw out surveys for game key cards to get the word out there to get a feel for how the community is reacting to them, strictly because the sales numbers reflected that the game key cards were not selling well. They may not care about the online discourse, but what they do care about is numbers. They care about action. So if you're not playing, they're gonna fix it. If you're not buying, they're gonna fix it. And a large reason why people end up not buying and a large reason why people end up not playing is because of the online discourse. So don't let anybody fool you into this idea that the backlash for the Nintendo Switch 2 and the scummy practices is not going to lead anywhere, because there are already cracks showing for the Nintendo Switch 2. These are compromises that are being met by a company that is seeing the effect of their decisions. And let me make this very clear. A large reason why so many people think that Nintendo covers their ears and doesn't listen is because during the entirety of the Nintendo Switch 1's life cycle, they didn't need to listen. Everybody was like, oh, they'll never drop the prices on their games. Oh, they'll never do Nintendo Selects again. They're gonna keep releasing these ports at full price. They're gonna keep drip feeding all of these Nintendo Switch Online games. And they're right, they did, because with the Nintendo Switch 1, it was very healthy and it was very lively throughout the entirety of its lifespan. So no matter how much you complained, it didn't matter. But if you go back a little bit further, when they weren't doing so well with the 3DS and the Wii U era, particularly in the early launches of those eras, they listened because they had to listen. And through all of the Switch's life, they didn't have to listen. But already, this early on into the Switch 2's life cycle, they're already concerned about game key cards, they're already not charging $80 for any more games, and they're already backpedaling on their flagship title in an update that they fixed in their minds, but now they're pushing it back to what the fans wanted and not what they believe they wanted. Numbers talk. They may have sold 5 million units in the first month, we'll find out exactly how many in a couple days, but they didn't sell that many $80 titles as standalone purchases, they didn't sell that many game key cards, and they saw that Mario Kart World was dying. So despite the fact that many people would have you convinced that Nintendo won't listen and all of this is pointless, keep in mind that corporations always react to backlashes when the dollar value is involved. Anyway, that's all I got for now. I'll be back tomorrow for the weekly Japanese sales discussion. I suppose I might say something about the Direct as well, depending on what's actually shown. We'll see. As per usual, thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.